So we'll get started here. This is a joint town hall between UCCA and the Upper Captiva Fire and Rescue District. Really pulled this together so we could all catch up again on the debris removal process since we've transitioned from it being county run to state run. There's been a pretty good gap in time, and we thought we'd bring sort of the new principles involved in our debris management project now, which is the Florida Division of Emergency Management. It's AC Disaster, who are the consultants and I believe monitors. Cameron, you can let me know if I got that right. And then we've got Representative Sean Meek from DRC on. We've got Justin Lighthall with Lee County. We got Duncan Rosen, Commissioner of the Fire Board Fire District. And so we thought we'd just kind of get everyone together and sort of catch up on where we are with debris management. I don't think we'll go over in a lot of detail the full process. We've been through a lot of that. We'll touch on it sort of quickly, just clear bags or loose alongside the right of way. I think we'll talk a little bit about right of way versus right of entry, in case there's anyone who needs to go down the right of entry path. It's a different program altogether. And so I really want to first introduce, I know I don't have everyone in front of me because it's across different pages, but I know we have Darren Gibson with FDEM on. We have Ashley Mitchell with FDEM on. We have Karen Morris with AC Disaster on. We got Sean Meek with DRC, Justin Lighthall with Lee County. So really what I want to do is turn it over first to Darren, maybe, and to explain, or maybe Ashley, and explain where we are, how the state-led program sort of came to be, and sort of the difference of the process with the state being involved versus Lee County. And just to reiterate, Justin's on because Lee County is still involved, but more from a consultant view because they're our county, but the state is leading this program. So Darren, I don't know if you can unmute maybe.
Yeah, I'll take it. Yeah, I'm Ashley Mitchell. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay. Basically, I work on the debris task force with Darren. Darren's the lead of that. As Swin mentioned, Cameron Morris is the project lead for ACDC, so they're kind of with us. We handle that as sort of a double-headed thing to the state and the owners' representatives there. As the storm came through, as people were aware, essentially, catastrophic extensive damage was done pursuant to how FEMA likes to coin it. The island suffered catastrophic damage, and in that instance, Lee County reached out to the state for assistance. And so what we did is we took over some of the county contracts through the state. I'm not a contracts person. I don't know the specifics of how all that particularly works. I'm actually kind of the DDMS guy. I'm the one that we know where the debris is. I'm just trying to figure out where it goes. So that's kind of where my role comes into play. That's why I've been tied in extensively with the logistics of the Upper Captiva, UCCA areas, a lot of Fort Myers Beach, related portions there. That's why you also see me on a lot of the emails. But essentially, the operation started with that, and then so as we started figuring out, what logistics were going to be required to move stuff around, and then trying to figure out, how long does the operation go? What all is actually on the island? What needs to be removed? It just, again, and you guys are all aware, having been on the island, as residents in some way, shape, or form, the logistics of that changes in a manner of speaking. And as was mentioned at the last one, sometimes it's a little bit fluid for what we need to do to make sure that we, handle everything properly, between getting everybody back to their normal routines as best as possible, to ensuring that, we handle everything right with, permitting and land management, all the way up to, trying to put it in for FEMA on the back end, where, 3 years down the line, our grants folks that I work with on a daily basis will, trying to be, figuring out what we can do with FEMA on that side. So that's pretty much how it all started off.
Great. So Ashley, can I ask you a question, regarding, sort of the process right now? And we've talked about it, through some communication back and forth with the whole team. Can you explain the process of really the permits, right? Because a lot of this has been held up with permits, right? Initially, a lot of the holdup was with the barging, getting barging contracts in place and the allocation for barging all the material. But the big thing on debris, I mean, on vegetative now, is really getting an approved DMS from DEP, right? So that you can actually use a piece of land on the island to, at this point, just to ship material so then it can be barged off. Can you kind of talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. And do we have anybody on here that's like a realtor by any chance? Just out of curiosity?
I don't think Mark Muller is on.
I don't know if you had any hands raised on that one that you'd be able to see, but the one thing you always hear on the real estate side is location, location, location. And unfortunately, debris doesn't really know there's no boundaries for debris, unfortunately. And so things end up where they're not supposed to be. And that's basically where we have to come in and try and figure out where to put it. So long story short, what we end up doing is we go down the first list, which, Lee County has a bunch of approved sites. And, if Justin wants to kind of explain, how those are preset and everything, but it's pretty much the county submits a county emergency management plan. And part of that is their debris management plan. And within that, they have a bunch of structured sites that are set up to take in debris, both before and after storms. So what you call blue skies and gray skies, if you will. And within that, basically, they tag, certain areas that are out there. And one of the things that comes into play here is Upper Captiva, being a very special place, only had one area that was tagged for that, because it hadn't had to be used in a while, which is very fortuitous in an unfortunate way. It just means that you guys hadn't, had too many hurricane events, which is fantastic. But when it comes down to using it, unfortunately, some tortoises rather moved into it. So we had an imperiled species issue that came onto it with that. And I believe it was called Joe Wood, if memory serves, was the other thing that was found on the property. So that one, unfortunately, was rendered unable to be used. And when I say we're talking about unable to use, that is by the Department of Environmental Protection. So they have a very specific set of rules that we have to follow for the acquisition of a property. So there's certain setbacks that come into play, especially when you're dealing with an island. You deal with tidal coefficients that come into play, mangrove, a lot of protected species out there. When you have a unique landscape such as Captiva, it unfortunately adds another layer of, that beauty adds a layer of permitting that kind of comes into it, because DEP also wants to protect that, even though sometimes the measures might seem a little extra. So in those cases, we had to start, kind of looking into what can be used. I mean, theoretically, you could barge it off bit by bit, but it would take forever. And you guys would, we would run the risk of running into the next hurricane season trying to do that one. That's what nobody wants to do. So, safety is paramount in this one. So a lot of it is trying to figure out what's the fastest way to get it there. So then we start looking at properties, and then we also look at what ways we can take the material and consolidate it to try and get it off faster. So if you think of it in a terms of just pure logistics, it's a matter of taking it from this state to this state, but trying to compact it bit by bit, whether it's something called ACI, which is air curtain incineration, which is kind of like a picture a rocket stove with a really neat layer of air across the top of it that kind of keeps everything suppressed, to just generalized mulching, in which case we're talking to the folks that handle the parks out there to see if they might, be able to utilize that, because it is, nutrient rich and able to be utilized for that purpose. Also it's available to the residents, but I don't believe the residents are really wanting to do it, because then it's, again, anybody that's done any gardening knows you add mulch, you have to kind of stay on top of the mulch. I'm a lava rock guy myself, honestly. Yeah, I go the easy route as well. So a lot of that type of stuff, kind of comes into play. And for the logistics side of that, if Sean, if you'd like to kind of give them a little bit of an idea of how the logistics of that works, that would help them kind of understand that at that level.
You're still muted, Sean. David, can you find Sean Meek and unmute him? There you go, Sean.
All right, now how's everybody doing?
Good.
In regards to the what Ashley was discussing, the DMS, the debris management sites, hauling the vegetative debris, we're, like he was saying, we're trying to take a big fluffy material that takes up a lot of space, which would take several barge trips across the water. Like he's saying, it would take forever. So what we're looking at right now doing is working on 2 different properties to where we can get permitting with DEP, and Ashley's assistant on that. And then we're going to look at, for right now, we're looking at grinding the material as stated. If for whatever reason, if the park doesn't end up wanting the debris, then obviously we're going to end up barging that and taking it to a final disposal site at a landfill. In regards to the veg, that covers that. But now C and D, the construction debris, that's what we're currently working on. And we are hauling that to the temporary DMS, which is the little mow. And we're reducing that material prior to loading it on barges and then hauling it across to the mainland to the final disposal site as well. That answer the question?
Yeah, so really, so winding back just a sec. So right now, is it the path that you're going to grind the vegetative and then see if the state will actually allow that material to go into the state preserve? Is that what you said, Ashley?
That's basically one of the options. We're trying to explore pretty much anything that would essentially something that makes it faster to get off the island in one way, shape, or form, but also might offer other opportunities. And it also looks good from a DEP standpoint if we're trying to enrich the area at the same time. So it kind of helps us along, multiple ways. So, but anything that it's basically working from a sense of efficiency down to cost, and just, trying to balance those two, with efficiency being the higher part of that seesaw.
And there's been some back and forth, right, over the last 6 weeks on the air curtain. Is that something that's still being looked at as a possibility, or are we kind of past that?
Sean, I think that's our fallback at the moment. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. That's correct.
Yeah.
Ideally,
yeah.
Ideally, that would be the most productive. I mean, we'd get rid of the debris. There'd be less material at the end, would be in the ash. You might look at one barge trip as opposed to, X amount of barge trips to haul the chips if the parks don't end up needing it. So that ideally, that's the perfect world, is if we're able to use ACI.
Understood. So usually we would sort of leave Q&A to the very end. I'd actually love to open it up right here, because I know that there are going to be questions regarding the ACI use and everything. So if anyone has questions on the potential of the air curtain being used as a fallback, now's the time to ask and sort of get answered. Bill Fry, you have your hand up.
Yeah, yes, and that was exactly where I wanted to come in, because the Islanders seem to be as concerned that all of the reports they've seen on the Cape Coral burn sites don't appear to be ACI equipment that's doing the burn. They look like they're open piles, or the ACI doesn't do as well as people are being told, because there's always this large amount of smoke and flame that they can see at the burn site or at the DMS site, or whatever they're calling it over there. And like I said, I'm specifically talking about the news reports on the local media that were pretty prevalent during the month of October. And I'm not sure that's still going on over there, but can you explain to them and to us if there was a difference? And this may be more a county question than a state question, but that's where I think where the pushback from local Islanders is that they're being told that those were air curtains over in Cape Coral. Cape Coral media report showed tremendous flame, tremendous smoke, flame and light after dark. And that's, I think, where the pushback comes, not if it really does as well as the websites say it should do. Does that make sense why I'm asking the question? Thank you.
I think the best way to tackle this, I'm thinking, Sean, I'd like you to kind of speak a little bit on ACI that we're utilizing. And Justin, are you on? I think I saw you.
Yeah, I can talk a little bit. If you want, I can jump in on the Cape Coral stuff.
Yeah,
right
that's
before
what I was
Sean
hoping you
jumps
could kind
in.
of shed some light on that portion. And I want to preface a lot of this, as anybody knows, anybody that's kind of within this industry at all, emergencies generate hits. From a media standpoint, you don't always hear the good numbers. It's kind of like a very large focus on what's going wrong and not what's going right in a lot of cases. So I'd like to kind of preface that a little bit. From a state side, we're talking millions and millions of pounds of debris have been moved, and there's still millions left to go in those cases. And a lot of times we see attempts that are made, whether it's on the county level in the beginning when they were just trying to get themselves ready and moving stuff out there. A lot of times, and I'm sure Justin's folks were probably out there 2 days straight through the night working, getting stuff out there so everybody can move around freely, get back to stuff, helping folks get as much going as possible. But we don't always see those stories on it. So I just want to kind of preface that with a little grain of salt, that I do understand, Mr. Fry, that that the media does present that sort of stuff, and a lot of times there will be definitely a grain of truth to most of it. But on the other hand, if they just come out with happy, smiley stuff, it's not always going to be, the best thing to get viewership. Nobody's tunes in to, at 11 o'clock to see a cat stuck in the tree. But, if Mittens is up there and it's, it's Mitten o'clock and we got to find out how to get him out of that tree, everybody's going to watch the firefighter climb up and go get him. But, if it's just cat in a tree, okay, that sort of stuff. So, Justin, I'm going to turn it to you.
All right. Yeah. So just to touch a little bit more on the ACI versus pile burns. So the city of Cape Coral, first of all, the city of Cape Coral as a municipality of unincorporated Lee County is handling their own debris collection. But even by handling their own debris collection, what we've seen is a little bit of pushback from the media, as referenced primarily from the pile burn activities. Those pile burn activities do require the same guidelines through DEP pre-authorization. Which is a 300-foot buffer from any residential dwellings, as well as, I believe, a 100-foot buffer from any street level. So those pile burns permits are pendant on the daily conditions. So, once the DEP approves the site based on the burn location, from there, the Florida Forest Service would issue a burn permit for that particular day. So what we're seeing is that UCCA is actually currently in process of going through a pile burn process for their vegetative waste. And again, there's some days if it's windy or if it's too dry, then they would not be allowed to burn that vegetative waste. But when the conditions are right, then they are pursuing that. So it is a bit of a slower process oftentimes than volume reduction through chipping and grinding, but it can be proven to be very effective. So it's dependent on areas, it's dependent on the DMS availability, helps being on an island environment. So that's why one of the particular sites that pre-authorized site that Ashley had referenced earlier, just south of the residential dwellings on island. That was the one site that Lee County had pre-authorized, would have been really good for air curd incineration or pile burning. Unfortunately, with those imperiled species, it wasn't going to work out that way. But yeah, there's a number of variables, a number of factors that would need to be passed through, starting with the DEP and then the Forest Service. So it is very heavily regulated for the safety and for the precautions of any smoke screening. We've seen that it's different municipalities choose to go different routes, but just based on the population density that we've seen here increase, especially on the mainland over the past few years, there's so many residential dwellings or businesses that it does become a pretty daunting task to control that smoke and ensure that you're not getting the negative effects when the wind may blow towards these dense neighborhoods. I know we've seen that sometimes some of those effects over with like the M&W Hort situation over there blowing towards Briarcliff, San Carlos Park. So you see just some examples of where that smoke can cause issues. But overall, I mean, the ACI process is a fairly common trend in debris management.
Got it. Any other questions from the community about the potential of burning air burners.
Well, Swin, just to clarify there before we leave that one, so what Justin described is a pile burn. That's not the same as the air curtain burn, right? So Bill's original question was about the smoke and flames that people had seen in the report, but that was due to being a pile burn, not an air curtain, different equipment, different approach. Is that right, Justin?
That's correct. So the ACI process would involve bringing in additional equipment to help steer that smoke. It would be more of a contained burn. You're right, absolutely. So the pile burn, you have less control over where that smoke would be going.
Jason?
Hey, thanks everyone for the time. Certainly primarily interested in results and timing. So the conversation that we've just had, when does the conclusion end? When do we get to a conclusion on that front and figure out what we're doing?
Well, right now, the best way to say that is we don't really know. I mean, that's just, we can give you a general idea of, it will be a few months for sure. But like I said, ultimately, the aim is to try and get everything back before the next. I mean, I'd like to say by, like, I had heard somebody throw around Easter as an option. I would love to kind of see that one, come to fruition. But, weather being, an issue sometimes or something of that nature, we have to kind of take a lot of stuff into consideration. Plus, it depends on what we're allowed to do on island and the speed that we can get it done. If this was something as easy as just bringing in a bunch of trucks, you could run through with the cranes and 1, 2, 3, it would be done. But we've also had concerns that, if we just do 1 or 2 right-of-way passes, then we're going to have construction and demolition as people get in there and do gutting and mucking. If we don't allow for a pass on that, then folks may not have an option to get that off the island, and Lee County doesn't have the ability to come and just move that at the tail end of that, since we have that under our portion as well. So, and I'm pretty sure that the island folks aren't really wanting to, have their own GCs cover it, because that's going to increase those costs exponentially as well. So it's a little bit of a balance there to get as much stuff moved as quickly as possible. But as the portion moves on, we'll start having a better sense. And when the reporting comes through SWIN and the Civics Association to you guys, you'll have a better sense of it as it's moving forward.
So your best case scenario is 7 months after the event.
Oh, no, I'd like to see it over that. I'm just saying, I think that would be the absolute worst case, honestly. But to me,
I think we're at the worst case scenario now. I'm sorry, as a resident there, I'm kind of feeling like I'm at that point. So the fact that we don't have any clear answer, we've gone through 3 agencies at this point in time, it feels like, and I feel like we're waiting on 6 others to make a decision on our behalf. Candidly speaking, you're talking to someone who's pretty frustrated. I'll leave it at that for fear of saying more than I should. Thank you.
Thanks, Jason. Brian?
So I guess I think everybody has the same question. When do we need to have the debris out there to be picked up for both the vegetation and the construction debris? When do we have to have it out there? Because not everybody is able to contract people to come in and do this right now.
Yeah, so really, Ashley, I think Brian, real quick answer is now, right? Get it out now. But I think the real answer people are looking for is not only when is everything really going to hit its stride, but when is that last pass, right? So everyone that I've talked to really talks in terms of 3 passes, right? So there's going to be a pass, there'll be a little bit of time away, there'll be a second pass, a little bit of time away, and then a third pass. So, I've brought up to all of you the complexities of our island and dealing with insurance, right? So this isn't Charlie, in where our island was hit pretty hard, but the rest of Lee County was not decimated. All of Lee County has been decimated to a scale that the insurance adjusters can't keep up, the public adjusters can't keep up, remediation people can't keep up. And so it's just going to take longer, right? There are people, I think there's a a misnomer about our island that we're just a bunch of rich people that, you know, we can just rebuild, no problem like that. Majority of our property owners are dealing with insurance and can't move forward with, you know, a $40,000 to $80,000 new roof, right? And $125,000 in siding and things like that until they know what they're getting from their insurance company, right? And start getting that cash flow. And many of them are dealing with insurance companies that have sent them a $7,000 check, right? And so, you know, what I've brought up is a lot of these roofs are not going to come down. The damaged siding and all of that's not going to come down for many months. So I think really what a lot of people are wanting to know is like, is there a definitive end, or if 8 months from now people are still pulling stuff off, are you going to be around to take that stuff?
Exactly. That's my question. Plus, we have the additional factor of drying vegetation sitting in the roads that we need to get rid of before something. I mean, we're into the dry season now. This is a critical time right now.
And absolutely correct on the vegetation. We've worked with the fire management officials on the island. They've actually targeted areas. I'm assuming that is still standing unless you guys want to change what those areas are, and we can give that to Mr. Meek on island there to you know, pick those priority areas for something. We were told there are, I think, 6 or 7 streets that were supposed to be prioritized based on the volume and the dry debris itself. To have that done, and that in effect is that first pass, is everything that's in those right of ways for you to have that done. And the initial thought process of that is to get it so that you can move freely around the island a little bit more, especially as you're, you know, moving into the new year and everything's kind of going on with holidays, and making sure everybody's got enough movement out there with it so that we can get the first portion of that up out of the way, which then frees you a little bit more for the folks who are able to start moving a little bit of that debris more forward onto the right of way again, if they have the ability to do so. If not, it gives them time to try and find folks who might be able to assist. The state might be able to suggest certain volunteer organizations that might be able to assist in those cases. We don't know, you know, who's available in the area right now, but there are lots of ones that can help in a lot of cases, especially with elderly residents. That is something that we do see a lot. I don't work on that side of the house anymore. When I say that, I'm more of a public assistance person now, and I used to be individual assistance. So I helped with housing and damage assessments back in the day, doing that portion. And then the ideal thought of it would be to give adequate messaging between each pass to let folks know what's expected to be picked up on the next run, and then also give them time to find folks that can help with that, to talk to their insurance companies. Well, as you can see, though, from the 2 discussions, from what Brian had brought up, and then what I believe Jason had brought up, we run into an impasse there because we don't have a way to, we can't speed it up, but keep it going indefinitely is the problem. So ideally there has to be a cut point where we're going to say, hey, we've moved as much as physically possible for this, but we can't wait around on full rebuild efforts either, because we can only deal with hurricane and disaster specific debris and what was caused from that. The moment we start putting anything that would be considered general contracting debris out there, anything that's specific to a rebuild. So like, say somebody decides to put new sheetrock up and they throw that out there and FEMA just gets wind of that, we immediately take that hit stateside. We will not get reimbursed for that. And the more we get hit with that, the more taxes are going to go up across the board in those cases. And nobody wants to deal with that portion of it either, because, you know, federal government wise is doing anything they can to hold that portion off. So we have to make sure we do everything by the book, because, you know, ultimately we're the ones that the state side that have to look at that and, you know, handle it as best as possible for all parties involved. So it does put us in a very unfortunate position of having to do that. But on the other hand, we want to sit and discuss it with everybody adequately.
I think the key is some type of notice. Okay, that these are the streets that we're going to hit. This is when we're going to hit it, so that we know that we need to get as much as we can out there in pass 1, pass 2, pass 3.
And that's what we would definitely, we can do that. We can even get it as granular. Sean, how granular can you say that we could get this on a given day if you were to map the island out and have discussions with Mr. Swinford and the representatives?
On a daily basis, I could just give an update at the end of the day, what progress we made, if that would assist.
What about in that instance, like to give them an idea of what's been done, but also like looking forward to the next day? Would that be something that you guys could like, and you guys tell me from Swin and crew, what is your ideal reporting methodology that you would like to see on island that would assist everybody that's on this call? Because I'm kind of looking at you as the royal you for everyone. You guys tell us what the best bet would be.
Yeah, so I think what everyone will be looking for is sort of that future map of where you're going, right? So right now it's the core 6 streets. It's really 5 main arteries and Kingfisher, right? So it's North Airport, Sea Air, and then the straight line from Spanish Gold through Rum Road all the way to the end, right? So that's for emergency vehicles so that fire district can freely get down the main arteries to try to get to the others. I think that if we knew that, you know, and I'm not trying to pick one or the other, everyone in the community, if you were going to say, hey, we're going to start over here on White Pelican and we're going to be like Pac-Man and we're going to go up and down all the way and then we're going to end at Panama Shell, or we're going to start at Panama Shell and go the other way, instead of it being like, well, is it Escondido today? Is it, you know, Cutlass tomorrow? I think if people have a general idea, or if you're going to have 2 teams start at both ends and come to the middle, or start in the middle and go out, then they're going to have an idea of, okay, they're starting this street and they're going to move this way. Well, I'm 2 streets from where they're starting. I probably should get my stuff out pretty quick. So I think we just sort of need that map to know where the work's going to be done, instead of it being this potential random pick that we don't know.
Yeah. And we can definitely do that. And if you guys are amenable and that's your choice, we can even turn it over to you to tell us where you'd like the prioritization to go across those 6 streets. And even it might logistically, like, for example, I'm sure Sean can look at it and from his expertise and just years of knowledge of that can tell you the best, fastest way based on where the equipment's at and all that sort of stuff. On the flip side, we could tender that against what your wishes are, collectively. And so that way you can, as a group, judiciously decide, what's the best starting point where you'd like to see that moving. And then those 2 can kind of come together and you can find a nice medium that'll work for everybody.
So I would push back on that and say that you guys should be the experts. You should be able to look at it and pick the thing. If we put it on all of us, I think all of us individual go to my street first. Protect my house from the dry vegetation.
It's the same way we always defer, like we're dealing with something with the county. Yeah. Justin, how many times you get calls from me saying, hey, I'm just running something by you first. We are the ones that are taking control of it, but in the same token, we always want to defer in case you guys have something specific that is unique to your island, unique to your needs, and that can change on a daily basis. When we talk about the fluidity of the project, something else to keep in mind there is if something comes up, like say somebody reports something to you and says, we like this targeted today, even if it's a 1 or 2 off, those things can be factored into it. So, when we talk about fluidity to that, it's not always an uncertainty. It's the ability to make those changes on the fly to assist in those cases as well.
Yeah.
Can we?
Go ahead, Brian.
Can we address the bull bag, bagster, black bag issue at some point here?
Yeah, we will. We'll get to the we'll get to the bag stuff here in a few minutes. So Mark, just real quick, I want to bring up a couple things and we'll get your questions. So one thing I wanted to just make sure of, Ashley, is, through each pass, we have 6 debris types that we're talking about, right? We have vegetative, C&D, white goods, electronics, household hazardous waste, and flooded out golf carts. So is each pass going to include all those debris types? Because I saw communication back when we were kind of going back and forth on things that really spoke more to this first pass being vegetative And then a combined pass of vegetative and C and D, not even mentioning the other debris types. When we were originally talking with Justin and Doug with the county back, when they were leading it, it sounded like each pass would include all 6 types. So can we just talk about that? Because, if you're not picking up golf carts until pass 3, no one needs to be putting them in the right of way today. We lost you.
I'll say understood. And actually, I'm going to turn that over to Sean. From a logistics standpoint, that's going to be in his wheelhouse.
Okay. Can y'all hear me?
Yeah,
Okay.
gotcha.
In regards to that, basically what we're going to focus on first is the C and D and the veg. That does, once we hit those 6 streets, once we see that there's a need and a full load of the HHW and e-waste and white goods, we're going to start bringing in crews that are going to come right behind all the crews picking up C and D and veg, and we'll start moving that stuff as well. A lot of that we're trying to separate from the actual C and D because people couldn't, put everything in the same pile. So we're having to separate that, deal with the 2 main problems that cause the largest piles and hazards to your roadways and your residences. And then we'll come back. Not saying that we're going to go do the whole island and then come back. I mean, as we clear a road, if we have full loads, we're going to come in and get that. If we move to the next road because there's not a whole lot to make a full run, well, then we'll clear the next road and then come back and grab that and keep moving forward progressively.
Got it. So I guess the question is, if I have household hazardous waste, say I have some paint or, fuel that's gotten, was in flooded out and everything, should I put that out today?
Yes, sir. I mean, we're already seeing it everywhere. It's just ideally the residents need to know to keep that separated. I know the properties, the right of way is small, but if they can keep that separated from the C and D and veg, ideally that's perfect. If there's not enough space, they could keep that on their actual property back away from the right of way. And then as we clear those larger piles that are more of the hazard in the immediate threat, then they can move those forward. And then that'll open up, the opportunity for us to swing through and knock those out.
Right on. Mark?
Thanks. First of all, I want to say I'm glad to hear you guys are grinding. I'm kind of in favor of that. You mentioned that you may be putting the grinding of the chips in the preserve. And I think for all of us, I think the best place if you're to do that would be in the area. If you went through the dunes lot and then headed north out into that peninsula out toward NCIC behind the canal, hardly anyone goes down there. And if we create a little road there to get to a pile, it would actually create an extra trail that would be more usable. Whereas if you dumped elsewhere in the preserve, it would actually kind of destroy the best area and a lot of people's use and enjoyment of that area. So if that other area would be a great area that most people don't ever use and I'm probably never even noticed. So that would be the place. If I had to make a choice, I'd rather see it go off island, but if you had to go in the preserve, that would be the place. It would do the least amount of damage to the island and the people, and maybe even create a trail that creates something that would be a little more usable than what's there now. So that'd be my suggestion there. And as for the burning, I personally think 300 feet is too close. Like if you're burning 300 feet from my house for 4 months, that would really, really be a problem for me and my family. And I know you're talking about air curtain and all that, but you all know it's still burning, it's still smoke, it's still breathing dioxins and other things. That's not far enough in my opinion. So yeah, I think 300 feet would have to be a bigger distance. There's my thoughts. And I hope you guys can keep moving on that chipping and getting it off the island thing. But like I said, if you did keep it on, that would be the place to focus on, that area across from NCIC down the canal in that North Peninsula where no one ever goes.
Heard. And I'm not sure, I don't remember the gentleman's, there's 2 gentlemen's names I was given that are the park management folks on that. And they have not told us yet where the possibilities are for that, or even if they'll allow us to put it out there as of yet. So I have a feeling we'll probably find that one out after the Christmas holidays, more than likely. And but if there's any, suggested areas for that you guys would like to see that, I would be more than happy to, to pass those along to that. And just, explain to them, hey, we've had a request, from the residents, for that.
That would create the least amount of impact on the islands. And it's a great entryway going through the dunes lot where it's not impacting like traffic. Like say you went in by my house, I've got a 9-year-old autistic child who would be in great danger having all those tractors going by on a like nonstop. Going down by the dunes would put a low risk. You're not just bringing the tractors to be a little further away from traffic wise if you had to do it. Obviously the best course is to get it off the island, barge it, chip it, get it off the island, compress it, whatever. But if you had to, I think that would be probably have the least impact on the islands and the best access point and put it in a place where no one really goes. So it's doesn't like destroy all the places we like to generally walk and hike and do things and for the island. So that would be my suggestion, that peninsula on the other side of the canal towards NCIC.
Sure. And if somebody, Swin, if you wouldn't mind working with Mr. North
Yeah.
on it, I'm assuming North is your last name. I apologize.
No, it's Mark Muller.
Okay. I just
Yeah,
saw
Mark, I'll get with him. I know where you're talking about.
because I don't know the specific layout of the island and everything, so that would definitely give me something that I can forward along for them to take under consideration.
Basically fortified Tom's Trail.
Because if I just say behind the dunes, they might be like, I have no idea what you're talking about, and I want to make sure I'm representing it properly. So
Yeah, and I think underscoring what Mark's saying is, the preserve. I'm not sure how the state park guys view it, but our property owners, our residents, our visitors use it. Like it's a hiking area for everyone. It's not just the stretch that goes between right there at Panama Shell and Rum Road through to the south end. People hike the whole thing, and so I don't think people want to see it like, oh, it can't go here anymore because there's huge piles of mulch.
Yeah, and even like when they made that road, there's a lot of people complained about how they wrecked that path and it was so beautiful and it's not so pretty anymore. And a lot of people actually complained about that just when they widened the road in that area. So I think that's why I chose that area as an area to be less impactful to the people on the islands and the island in general. And it might even provide a benefit because it's not really that hikeable. It's full of poison ivy. It's not a great spot. So then if they create a little road, and also it's further, they can go further back in where it's, not affecting the homes while they're doing the work and, bring the tractors back and forth. It's far enough away where it's not like affecting renters and owners and things like that. And safety issues like I would have by my house where my son could get killed. You know what I mean? So it's very, it's such something, just an idea.
Thanks, Mark. Steve?
Yes, I just have 2 questions. One is, given the fact that we're in the dry season right now, and we're going to have at best a diminished fire department here in a week and a half, why are we even considering or talking about a burn solution? Then my second question is, where are we talking about for this chipping, this whole thing that has to be permitted? Where is that going to be, and how soon is it going to start? That's it.
Just understood on the burning portion. Sean, you want to speak to the chipping possibilities?
Yeah, the chipping locations, currently the land that we're looking at, working on getting permitted, is 691 Rum Road at the end of Oyster Shell, and then
That's the Dunes HOA lot, Steve.
Yes, sir. And the other one that we're working on is Mr. Swinford, the 522.
22. That's the corner of Rum Road and Longboat Circle. Yeah. Bill?
Yeah, Steve also asked when that.
How soon is it going to start?
You want to take that, Sean?
Yeah, I mean,
they're wanting to know how soon will the chipping actually start? You're waiting on DEP at this point, right?
Yes, sir. Correct.
Yeah.
And that is correct. All we're waiting on is this one last bit. I believe all the other pieces are in place for that. It's just a matter of the last little, it's a kind of almost like a form letter, if you will. They don't have to do any more inspections, anything like that to be done. It's pretty much, we were just finalizing land use agreements, getting the last little bit from DEP. The problem is like anywhere, while we are, as DEM, emergency management, if you will, we're on 24/7, 365. Not all agencies are. So I'm actually asking some of the folks at DEP to work on their personal time to actually assist within this. So I have folks that they're working lockstep with me, even though they're technically being given time off, at the state level. They are still working on this because they know how much of a lift we're trying to do on our side to get everything moving.
Bill?
Well, Steve and Jason and maybe even Brian, they touched on the frustration, and I get with Ashley and Sean, your frustration as well with different state activities, whether it's the DEP for a chipping lot or it's forestry to let you put the chips out someplace. Most of us had hoped that once the state took responsibility, some of that buck passing and the delays that the different state agencies that were focused on environment and forestry could actually get moved along. The reason that the frustration exists is, and I'll just use my lot as an example, not because it needs to be done first, but my neighbors used half of my road frontage to put all of their palm fronds and palm cuttings and stacked on almost half of the road frontage, which means that I don't have any place to put any of these other items, other categories to be picked up and to be staged. So until the debris stuff, which is the real problem that you're having with the different state agencies, gets done, that's the thing that everybody's really concerned about, because dry season and all of the other issues. But it's also the most bulky thing on most of our lots. And until that stuff is cleared off, I can't even begin to clear the rest of my vegetation that's staged 50 feet back into the yard, because there's no place along the road to put it unless I block the road, that I'm not going to do. And so that's the frustration. We get that although you're a state agency, Ashley, and Sean, I guess you're a state contractor, you still have the same state agencies that were putting up the roadblocks with the county, putting up the same roadblocks to you. And it's not so much when you're going to end, it's when is it really going to start, so that it starts to clear some of that space for us to start stacking more crap along that the edge of that right of way. And so until that is, we really have a way to know that started. Most of us aren't going to see the vegetative stuff go away. And like I said, I get that you got a problem with the other state agencies because they don't have the same sense of urgency and work hours, shift work hours that you all have and get paid for. But that's the key question, I think, that Steve is asking, that Jason kind of mentioned his frustration. Brian was also talking about, I think. So until we have some idea of when it's going to start, specifically the vegetative, because that's the thing that seems to have the roadblock, most of us feel like we're in the same limbo we've been in since the 1st of October. The other half of my edge of right of way were gifts from Forestry Service whenever they cut down all the live palms that weren't dead or weren't leaning or anything else that had been there for decades. I've got now 6 or 7 trunks that are 20 to 30 feet long, including the top of the fronds. When I left 2 weeks ago, they were blocking the other part of my driveway and the other 30 or 40% of my edge of right of way. And so those can't be moved easily without equipment, because forestry put them down intact and just pushed them up into different lot owners. And I was lucky enough to get not just the 3 that they cut from mine, but 4 or 5 others, I think, that were from down the street, because I already had a big stack. And so that's part of what's going vegetative that has to be moved. That's so large that even I can't pay to get it chipped, because they're palm trunks that are 12 and 14 inches thick. So that's why we're frustrated. It's not to take out on anything on you, because we know you're doing the best. It's those other bubbas and the other state agencies that aren't helping any of us.
And it's, I mean, and
That's
they-
the frustration.
but to their credit though, they are helping. I mean, we're talking, you have one,
I know.
kind of 1.5 people for the entire region. There's a woman named Renee that works with DEP that is one of the most hardworking people I've run across in this entire thing. I hit her with probably 10 emails a day asking for updates, asking for everything from an entire golf course that I'd like to have looked at, which is 50 acres, to, you know, these small parcels that we're looking at, trying to figure out, you know, can we utilize this in this area, to things that are clearly wetlands that I know are not going to be approved. And yet I'm still asked, hey, put these through. On the same token, and while I want to, you know, kind of show some, you know, empathy to that frustration, on the same token, on the DEM level as a state agency, we also have the same people that express frustration. Like, we're on multiple calls a day, and some of the ones that we get are the same people that are saying, you know, I don't have anywhere to live because my house has been demoed, but I don't have a trailer from FEMA yet. So we have those folks that we're working with. We have people that, you know, have basically nothing left over, you know, it's kind of to go to, and the counties, you know, aren't available sometimes, you know, with sheltering might be closed. So they're trying to figure out where to go. So we're, you know, we're not only managing people, we're managing expectations at the same time. So there's a lot of moving parts that come into it, but I can assure you there's no agency right now that's worth their salt that's going to step up and say, hey, we're just going to throw red tape on here for no reason. The problem is because they all answer to a higher power in a case. And I was going to say, I'm looking behind you, Bill, and I see you understand chain of command based on what I'm seeing on that wall behind you. And so for me, I have to kind of put it like that. Like I'm a mid-level cog in a large machine, and each little part of that goes higher and higher until it produces something. And so at this point, we're all kind of beholden to that. So for like DEP, for example, I'm sure we could probably get them to cut some corners, but I can guarantee you a gentleman named Chris Russell would be at my doorstep the next morning going, why did you allow that to happen? Because he's the EPA guy. So the moment that comes into play, then they start getting looked at and so forth down the line. So it's one of those ones where we all have to follow that chain of command. And unfortunately, sometimes the chain is a little bit longer in certain cases, especially when somebody else has the purse strings, like, you know, the federal government side. So that's kind of where we kind of come into play on that. If we had unlimited resources, I guarantee you we'd have a barge on every corner of the island. We could pull everything off in a couple of days and everybody would be happy. But fortunately, we just don't have that type of liquidity to pull off. So that's kind of where we're at.
So
Just to clarify, I don't think most of us are looking for the immediate answer. We know that, as you said, I understand red tape very well, but it's managing expectations of islanders on when the vegetative, specifically the vegetative, I think, is going to start, because that seems to be the one that's most problematic. And I get that there are lots of hurdles that you're trying to jump across. It's just, I'm saying most of this for the other folks on the island, so they understand that frustration's not going to get us, any of us, anywhere. And relatively speaking, we survived the hurricane much better than a lot of other places I've seen on the news. So we should.
And Bill, so I'm going to kind of answer that and let Ashley and Sean sort of either back it up or deny it. I believe the vegetative is imminent, right? But it's going to be almost another 2 weeks, because everyone stops work tomorrow and we'll be back. No, they're not, because
unless I am mistaken, and I'll need Cameron or somebody to verify that, or even possibly Sean from what's there. We will not be taking, I mean, we will have we have like a day or two off on both of the holidays. But as the state, like when we're talking like even Christmas, even New Year's, anything outside of that, we will be active, is my understanding.
okay, a conversation I had last night was that they were trying to do that, but that everyone, before that sort of possibility came up, everyone had already bought plane tickets home, going home, and then we're not going to have that. So from tomorrow to January 3rd, there's no work's going to happen. The goal was to have some stuff continue to happen, but from what I understand from DRC, that's not going to happen.
I was just given an update on that. They told me to check an email that I missed from a meeting, and yeah, you were absolutely correct on that one. See, I was looking at it from I was told we're doing these 2 days.
Yeah.
Those 2 days. So I was thinking everybody was kind of working, but I didn't realize the logistics of the crew that's actually, that was physically out there for that. So, but
Yeah, so to reiterate, Bill, what we sort of brought up, there's 2 land parcels that have land leases signed on them. They're ready to go pending DEP final sign off. Ashley and Sean, do you expect DEP to sign off on these parcels?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And unless something major comes up, which you would be informed pretty much minutes after the rest of my group was, as the representative, for that to kind of have knowledge of that, for proper messaging and everything like that, you would have pretty much the immediacy of knowledge the same way we would.
Right on. Mark?
Yeah, so I was just thinking of logistics on the chipping. I mean, we have a history here of like people like Duncan or Renya, whatever, going in, even after the storm, going and chipping street by street with the chippers. I don't see what's the point in having like 2 lots to chip on when you got to like say chip on the north end and bring it all the way over to say NCIC to chip it to bring it back. Usually, to me, it would make more sense. Or like say you're at Bill's house, why can't you have chippers there, chip it into some trucks and then take it off from there and go street by street? And that way, each street only has that noise and everything when they're on your street, kind of like we're used to here when we trip. I mean, every year we trim all the trees up and down every street, and it's a lot of debris. Obviously, we don't have to get it off the island, but it doesn't take that long. And I don't, perhaps, have you thought of just bringing the chipper on the road? And you don't have to deal with this DEP issue. You can use the road easements to actually chip on like we always have and always will. Perhaps, Sean, you might be able to help on that.
I'll go with that. The problem is with that, I mean, I see your idea and it sounds good, but in all reality, we're going to move a larger amount of debris with the trailers and the wheel loaders, loading them, getting the debris, just keeping that revolving, trailers leaving, another one's pulled up, and we're going to move faster and get that debris out of the right of way, off the main arteries and off all of your roads to a consolidated site. Which then we can worry about chipping it and what we're going to do after that fact. If we set up in a road with a trailer and a chipper, it's going to be a slower process and we're going to be clogging up your roadway for a lot more extended period of time.
I was kind of curious, Duncan, since you've done this several times, what is your opinion on that with your chippers and moving up and down the streets in terms of the time frame? And I mean, you've kind of done it at large scale in that sense, the whole island, really. Maybe you could add some thoughts to that.
Yeah, so I mean, typically over the years, I've done the road projects probably, I think 2 or 3 times. It was rather efficient, and we had a lot of debris. I mean, the Brazilian pepper was caved in on the roads. I mean, it was probably not as much as we're looking at, but there was a ton of debris that we were chipping as we would go. And we had a crew of about, I don't know, anywhere from 5 to 10 guys on any given day. And that process would usually take about 3 to 4 weeks if it was done correctly. So I did find that to be an efficient way, to deal with the horticulture debris. And obviously right now that's my biggest concern as a fire commissioner, is the fire risk and hazard that we're facing with the dry debris.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it seems to be more efficient, just like he did your chipping. You move down the street with guys throwing in the chipper, and that chipper could be throwing into your trailers going back and forth on that street, and you're not, instead of like bringing those debris all the way to like one spot and then bringing the trailers back, you could have them just running right to the barge with the chips, boom, 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 and just running them back and forth while they're chipping, and they're moving down the street, and the street's
So
getting
operationally, I agree with you, Mark. But we didn't do the process with it as much machinery. But I agree. I mean, there's no reason why a chipper can't go into a trailer and go down the road, up and down, straight to the barge.
My only thing is we're talking about a probably a totally different amount of debris. There's extra debris and there's still debris to come out. Just with what's on the road right now, I think that, I'm not saying didn't work for you in the past, but in our experience, I think the way that we're going to move forward, it's going to move faster. Y'all are going to see it move faster. It's just, this is the ramp up. I mean, there was a lot of issues right there at the beginning, but we're rolling now. So, I mean, you're going to start seeing it move, and then we're going to end up reducing that debris by chipping is our ideal goal. Like as soon as we get the clearance from DEP.
Well, wouldn't you be able to move faster if you worked right on the road easements? I mean, because you don't need any clearance, you're on the road easements. Why should you have to even wait for that? And I think it's been proven on the island. It's a very efficient way. And we're talking people who have done this on the island. I know you guys have your ways of doing things, but it has been proven to work pretty well. I said Duncan with his small team was able to do the whole island in like 3 to 4 weeks. And it's not just debris in front of houses. We're talking, this was trimmings on entire streets, whereas right now you're just picking up in front of houses. I would say it's a similar amount of debris when all said and done. Because even though it looks like big piles, but it's just in front of the houses, and that's like half the island. You know, just a thought.
Well, and
Mark, I think
let's
one of the problems-
let's not forget that, a couple of the companies came together and already went up and down the streets, as did forestry. So, and we did chip the debris that we trimmed already to clear the road. So I agree with Mark in that regard.
So Mark, Duncan, when you guys did that, you're trimming some Brazilian pepper trimmings. What's out there, what I see around my house are the full palm tree trunks, stumps, and huge things that need to be managed with big equipment and get it out of there. It's not going to be trimmed and you know what I'm saying, where it sits. Most of that stuff in front of my house is going to be, it needs heavy equipment to remove it. It can't just trim in place like we did before. It's a different animal to me.
Hey guys, can I make a suggestion real quick? And Sean, maybe you would be familiar with this. I don't think that Mark and Duncan are really on the right track. I think chippers are too small a scale, but the way to do this quickly, in my opinion, is to pick up the debris piles one time with a grapple hook, put it into a tub grinder. Do you know what a tub grinder is? Throw it in a tub grinder, exit the tub grinder into a trailer and get it onto a barge. That can be done large scale, large equipment, one pass up and down the street, and it would get the stuff off the island as quick as possible.
Yeah, and that's what I was getting. I didn't necessarily mean we're just using small chippers, but I mean using the equipment running down the streets from the tripper right to the trailer rather than having to move the stuff back and forth. It seems like it's much more efficient, and also it's a lot less back and forth the traffic, and the stuff's going right from the chippings right to the barge, from that street right to the barge instead of going all over the place. I think it would save a lot of time. I think, Michael, you would probably agree, right?
I would agree with that. I would just substitute a tub grinder for the chippers. Tub grinders are the way to get everything chipped very quickly.
I'm with you 100%. And even if they had to, a few chippers too, because a lot of the debris isn't exactly all trees too. Like in front of me, it's all stuff that a chipper could do. Duncan's chipper could chip that in a matter of hours, in front of my house. That's pretty good sized pile because it's just regular branches and stuff, for the most part. But yeah, I agree. The tub grinders be a great, and just move them down the street and no DEP permits, just move down the streets like we've done so many times in the past and including after the storm. You know what I mean?
Mark, I'd be happy to bring all my vegetation in front of your house.
Thank you.
It'd be better if it got chipped in front of your house.
Yeah, it'd be better if it got chipped right in front of your house and onto a trailer and onto the barge and not have to be carried halfway across the island to be chipped and then carried halfway across the island to the barge. There's actually a lot of minutes that can be saved. You actually waste a lot of time driving around this island too. So Sean, I just want you to think about logistics there a little bit from some people that have a lot of experience out here that have seen it happen. And if Duncan's crew can do this whole island in 3 to 4 weeks, I imagine your bigger team with bigger equipment can move quicker if done efficiently. Just an idea.
A quick point out here, just in case anybody's not aware of it. When we're talking about trimming a few things, you're picking that up. We're talking tens to possibly hundreds of thousands of cubic yards of debris, mixed debris as well. So, I mean, we do have to follow certain regulations on what gets chipped into that. So like, for example, let's say a chunk of a boat comes up. We throw fiberglass into a chipper and that thing spits out. That's way worse than any smoke inhalation issues you might be considering in those cases. So we have to be kind of careful with that one. And the other issue that we run into too is all the vegetative debris isn't just by itself. So if it's just, it's trimmings that are kind of, like if I'm trimming my yard and I just cut everything down, bunch of boxwoods, that sort of stuff, and everything's just there, I can put that all into one little chunk, burn it in the back if I want, ship it up. My father-in-law wants to, come over and run it through there, all that kind of stuff. It's pretty compartmentalized for what it is. Here, it's a little bit of everything. And if we put some of that stuff in there, we run the risk of creating way worse issues. And that's something we don't want, is to put fiberglass stuff out there. Or, God forbid, I believe you said you had a 9-year-old child. The last thing I want to hear is that a child ran across a piece of busted up metal or something that somehow got out from that situation. So we have to handle this with the portions that we're beholden to, but also with tantamount to safety, which, we're trying our best to get it off of there. It sounds like everybody's, pretty much does not like the burning option, and we're more than happy to follow alongside with that. But we do have to take a lot of that into consideration, where it might take a little longer to do it properly like that. But we're also talking and I say properly by our measures that we have to utilize on the state side with our contractors. But on the other token, we can definitely work within that framework that you guys are not wanting certain portions. It's the bigger point of it is, though, we are going to, have some time delays that are there, but it's also specific to the nature of the storm. And even comparing that to Charlie, which, believe it or not, there's actually less debris here than there was in Charlie. On the flip side of that, we're also dealing with different debris every single time. So like, for example, Michael up in the Panhandle, totally different debris layout. Irma, totally different debris layout in some instances, but other ones had, a little bit here and there of mixed debris. Other ones had only vegetation. We're still trying to figure out how to get concrete docks that have floated up off of certain places. I legitimately have no idea how to do those. So I know it's not being chipped or burnt, but outside of that, it's that kind of stuff. It's a lot of, what's the best solution for the fit at the time.
Yeah,
So-
I would also call out, there's a friend of mine who likes to say that perfection is the enemy of good enough, right? And so do we really want to start this process over, and the logistics of what that takes, when we're right at the moment that there's a process about to start? And is that process good enough? Because it's going to start.
Swin, this is Van. I'm kind of concerned about the location of the two lots that have been identified. They're both right in amongst the houses. And I think that, what Mike and Duncan discussed as far as localizing the chipping activity to the street that they're working on has a lot of merit. We only touch the material once, as opposed to dragging it all to a common location and having an extended period of time where we're grinding and reducing that material in one or two locations in the island for months, if not a year or more.
That one's more of a safety issue to get it off the right of way. We had discussed that with multiple folks on it. And the bigger issue, it seemed to be, was with everything being those right of ways. If we were to only pull that straight to the barge and take it off, we wouldn't be able to get that moved out fast enough before if another event came, all that pre-existing debris that was unable to be moved within that time frame, or even if you guys get a small storm. I mean, a microburst tornado right now could send all that stuff going. So it's better to get it out of those right of ways onto something smaller, so that it can be managed properly within that smaller area, instead of large scale down the pathways.
Right. Okay. So to be fully transparent, I live right next to one of those lots that's identified. And I understand your point that you're going to, consolidate the material that's on the right of ways, and you're going to put in this lot. And then what's going to happen? It's going to have to be reduced over a period of time. I mean, you won't be able to reduce it while it's being brought in. It's going to be chipped day and night for months on end. And is that something that we want? Obviously, it needs to be done somewhere, but where can we do this? And I think if we were to take the approach that that Mike and Duncan discussed, which is to do this, do the reduction while you pick it up and grind it right there in the street and then dispose of it at that point in time, that we would be able to get rid of this stuff probably faster and certainly with less impact to just a few number of places.
What about the Safety Harbor chip site?
I'm unfamiliar with that one. Anybody?
Well, we have Jeff Irvine on the call. Jeff, do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, I don't think it's anywhere near big enough, and the traffic that would come in and out of the club, I just don't think that's an option.
Yeah. So look, really what we're talking about here is inconvenience, right? So it's either a few people get inconvenienced, right? Because work's being done on a lot near you, or to Mark and Duncan's process, it's a little more equal inconvenience. The problem is someone's got to get inconvenienced during this process, right? We're going to experience inconvenience. So, you know, I don't know. I mean, Sean is a chipper going up and down each road. Ashley is a chipper going up and down each road and doing it. That process going to work. And the way I view that, and I'm not really for or against either one. I think either one can work. Is someone's going to be that last road. And so that last road, you're going to have stuff sitting there for weeks and months until they get to it, because they're going to have to do each road, not go collect everything, put it in one place, and then do that heavy lifting work.
Well, it shouldn't take that long, Swin. I mean, I mean, they can do it in about 4 weeks, going to just doing each street. And yeah, maybe they got to be a little more careful sorting the vegetation, I think, but it shouldn't necessarily take that long. So, but it's just using the right equipment. I mean, it should take them maybe a day to go down one street, like it always has and always will, you know?
And I think you also have to consider the size of some of this stuff. You're not going to be able to feed a typical chipper with a 12-inch, palm tree.
Well, perhaps maybe that's where maybe you use one of those sites just for some of the big stuff, so it's not like a constant. You're not hurting someone like, say, Van for 3-4 months. I mean, it is. Everyone says, yeah, one person has to take it for everyone else. It's not. You wouldn't want to be that person. I wouldn't want to be that person. So I'm always in the theory of trying not to hurt anybody, and I think Van's certainly getting hurt here. And it's and everyone's like, yeah, it's just one person, but you wouldn't want to be. If you were that person, you would be screaming too.
I think the problem too is I've never witnessed what you're saying, how y'all did it in the streets, but because of the size or lack thereof of y'all's thoroughfares, being in the street, staying at one house, moving from this house, moving forward, I think it's going to take a whole lot longer than 4 weeks with the amount of debris here alone. And that's just through experience doing this all over the United States. But I'm not against looking at the idea, but what I'll say is what we're doing, it works. We do it all over. And so just have confidence in us that we know what we're doing. That's what we're hired to do. And once you start seeing this debris moving, y'all are actually going to be happy. Now, with the deal in regards to a grinding location being next to your residence, I mean, we're going to have equipment on this island for the next few months. It's going to inconvenience everyone. Everyone's going to hear it. Everybody's going to be bothered. And we're going to do our best to stay out of the way of the regular people who live on island. And with the current way that we're operating, we're able to move our machines and our trailers that are hauling the debris out of the way, out of the main thoroughfare, still allowing regular everyday traffic to come through, as opposed to staying in one spot, moving slowly, hitting everything. We're still going to be blocking up that whole area. It's harder to move, in my opinion.
Bob?
It doesn't take that long though, but but maybe you might consider a hybrid approach, maybe doing both at the same time to move things quicker too. You have some maybe smaller things chipping and moving while, and maybe you just don't have the staff for that, but we've all seen it happen here with people like Duncan's team, whatever, and others, even like after the storm, which was a considerable amount of debris chipped in a very short period of time. So It
You know,
doesn't,
I
it's
think-
not really that long in terms in front of any house or any street, because it moves pretty quickly.
Somebody also mentioned the need or the lack of need, and I'll use your term, Mark, the chip and move method. If they do the chip and move method, the permit, if I understand it correctly, there's no permit requirement. And they could start on that immediately. If
That's
we're going to be waiting multiple weeks to get a permit, maybe both methods can coexist.
The
Like
permit
maybe,
is
Sean, you
almost
could start
identical.
now without having to wait for these DEP permits that have been taking forever. We could have already, while we were waiting for these DEP permits, we could have probably done half the islands while we're waiting. It's just I know you have your methods, but this is something that's been proven and no permits, and no one minds it because we've been doing it forever this way.
Bob?
Hey, first of all, thanks you guys. Hang on a second, I got some feedback. Thanks everybody for their
Still feedback a little bit there.
efforts. Quick question, what kind of chippers equipment are you guys going to be bringing in?
We're
Sorry.
actually looking, say again.
What size chippers?
I mean, moving stuff to this island, the exact size of the chipper, I don't know. We're looking at box grinders. We're looking at actual ones that would shred the material there on the ground that can be on a machine. That way it can move faster. I mean, we're looking at different ideas right now.
Okay.
Nothing set in stone.
Multiple units?
That's why we need multiple sites, and that's been our problem is there's not that many freed up properties or people that are in agreement to work with us to use the properties, or because say we have somebody that has a good property, but then it's got endangered species or something on the property that prevents us through DEP.
Sean, we lost you.
Okay,
You went on
appreciate it.
mute.
Thank you.
David, can you unmute Sean?
I cannot. I can only ask someone to unmute.
Oh, we had you for a second. There you go, Sean. We got you now.
Okay, but what I was saying is finding the properties is we just run into issues to where either, you know, it ends up having, you know, some type of species on it that DEP won't allow for permitting, so on and so forth. But then also people that just don't want to allow their properties to be used, or the issue of there's just lack thereof of actual adequate properties for us to use. That's just been the holdup. But now we have some good sites now that I think we're only maybe days away from having approval. Ashley, if you could correct me on that. And then once that happens, like I said, I just reiterate, there's more than one way to skin a cat. And I'm not saying y'all's way, it didn't work. I'm just saying, I know by experience that our way does. And that's what we're, right now, we got all of the equipment, all the personnel, everything already on island for the most part outside of a grinder. And if we steer in another direction, that's more downtime waiting on that new equipment, getting that stuff here and so on and so forth.
Tina?
What do you guys foresee as in terms of, would a chipper be running all day, 5 days a week, 6-7 hours a day on the site? Or how would that process work?
Ideally, we'd be running 7 days a week during daylight hours. Generally, it's about 8 o'clock to say 4:30ish because of the monitoring service that has to be here. They get their people out by 8 o'clock, give or take, and then they try to get off island before it gets dark. So they generally try to leave by 4:45ish in the afternoon. So during those hours, 7 days a week, if we have enough material there to grind, which we should, then it'll be a steady process.
Okay, so I guess I'm looking at the calendar saying we're coming up on 3 months now. And I understand that to go street by street might be a slower process. But at this point, at the risk of really just kind of making it hell for a few select homeowners to have this, equipment operating right next to their houses 7 days a week. It seems like, I think a lot of us would be willing to make the process a little bit longer, to go street by street and to do it in that fashion, as opposed to making it hellish for those few people. Just my opinion.
I personally don't think it will take that much longer because you waste so much time bringing the tractors back and forth and back and forth. And like you said, there's only 2 lots to chip on. That's a lot of debris to just chip on 2 little sites. There's little dinky lots for all that debris. I don't think it's going to take that much longer personally. And we've seen it. And I think, Duncan, you can attest that from experience. You've brought you've done this so many times. It's a lot of back and forth. I mean, you waste a lot of time driving those tractors back and forth, and that brings other risks as well. So just a feeling. So I'm with you, Tina. Thank you.
Any other questions on the vegetative removal process? Nicole?
Okay, so I'm probably the closest homeowner, as far as I know, as to the lot that's in question at the end of the canal. And if we start chipping, how long does those like piles of mulch stand there? Because as a person that's been in Florida for most of my life, I've seen on the news how these mulch piles catch on fire. So how long do those stay there before they get shipped off?
Get a decent sized pile, we're going to start trailering that down to where the little Mo's parked on the beach, and load that onto barges and barge it across as well, if we're not able to keep it on island, which Ashley's working on that.
I guess what my question is, the longer it sits there, when moisture gets into these piles and the sun comes up, we're on an island, it gets hot here, we have a huge risk of those piles catching fire quickly. So that's my question, is like the length of time. That's why I asked.
Yes, ma'am. I mean, it's going to be a revolving process. So as it's ground and we're able to load a trailer with it, it's going to be moved. You're not going to see a monstrous mound of, chips just sitting there. It won't be idle.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions on the vegetative process? Sean and Ashley?
Greg Foley here, quick question.
Yeah, go ahead, Greg.
You have a little mow down at the end of the runway down there. Is there any other way, the landfill on Staten Island had huge barges that would take care of the whole of Manhattan Island from Staten Island. Is there another way to get another huge barge and chip on the barge or incinerate on the barge? So we could do this off island, even if it's another month to get it there, it would solve a lot of problems. And there's some big, huge barges out there. Can the state get a huge barge where we could chip it right on the barge?
We're going to run into an issue of cost at a certain point where we're going to have to justify that from a federal standpoint. And as you increase that and everything kind of moves up exponentially, our chances of getting something like that covered adequately decrease as that moves up. So think of it like a scale where one part's going up, the other part's going to start coming down. And so we have to find that happy medium that hits dead in the center of that, so that we get the most bang for the buck out of it, so to speak.
Okay.
Again, that's one of those ones, ideally with full liquidity, if we had the ability to do it, you can move a monstrous piece of equipment off of there, have a handful of stuff start at one end and just push it all onto there as much as possible, something like that. But I mean, that's your, perfect world solution. And like Swin said, we're not trying to, we can't go for perfect over progress. And right now we're to the point where we can start making progress. And every one of these steps that we take that sets us back, or we're going to take all these into consideration. I just want to state that everybody's being heard. That's why we as the state came here. We have the state contractors here, we have the representatives from Lee County here. We're all here to take all these things into consideration, but we're also asking for you to have some trust in us to know that we are going to get this stuff moving. We'll have it out there, and that this process will move forward. And it'll be done. Like Sean said, once you start seeing things moving, you're going to be very happy with it. Things will be out of there. We'll have the messaging in place. We'll put all that stuff there so that this stuff moves. And we try and hit as many folks as possible. But I do understand. There are going to be some folks that might have some concerns with it. And if it does get to a point where that's untenable, for some residents, we can definitely come back to the table and have those discussions. Again, this is a fluid situation. We're going to do everything we can, to try and please as many people as possible with it. But again, you're not going to please 100% of the people 100% of the time. I have a toddler. I can tell you right now, I can't even please her probably 80% of the time. And I like to think I'm a decent dad. So, it's just one more kind of thing that we work towards to do what we can for the most, good as possible as good stewards of the state.
Okay, thanks. The only other suggestion I would have is to try to rotate the sites. So certain individuals it's going to be unbearable for them to stay on the island if there's a chipping operation going on 5-7 days a week right next door.
Those are full-time people, I might add.
Yeah, and those are people that live on the island. Like me, I don't live on the island. If you chip next to me, I wouldn't be there. I wouldn't care. So maybe that could be put out on the table to find various chipping sites of people that are not on the island, so they're not being tortured by this. Because right now it looks like the 2 chipping sites you have are right next to residents that are there full time. Maybe that could be taken into consideration in the future, and you could have a site near like a person like me that's not on the island full time. And I don't know, just suggestions out there. You could guys keep that in the open. Thanks.
We
Yeah,
did
so
toss that around.
the HOA lot is actually pretty far from homes. There's one house that's 2 lots over, that's Captivation, but the rest of the homes are fairly far from that lot. 522 definitely right next to Van and Sarah and everything. So totally
And Swin
understand
did
that.
help us with that. I mean, Swin's looked over every bit of the the mapping for the island. He's been instrumental in helping us find properties that were available on that. The issue is, and I think I've submitted 12 or 14 properties, because some of them kind of blur with each other. There's about 12 or 14 properties that ended up having to go through all those inspections with DEP just to get to the ones that we have now. Some of them weren't viable. Other ones, a gentleman named, I forget his name. It's a German gentleman. He had a couple plots that were great, but they're under contract. And I'm not going to have anybody, mess up a real estate contract on our behalf trying to get something there. It's just not fair to, ask that one. And so, we run across all these different little issues that kind of come up. I mean, in an ideal world, we could push everything right up onto the airstrip and try and slide it off of that. But that would require the airstrip to be down for a couple of months. And I'm pretty sure nobody wants to do that one. So, we have a lot of different little things that we were trying to do. And again, these are all ideal case scenarios, but we don't have ideal case options all the time for it. Now, if there is something where we could get like a plotted map of something of, sites that are, I don't know how you would necessarily try and catch it, where it would say like, this owner's here, but these 2 aren't there, or something like that, where it shows full-time residency as opposed to part-time, and those who would be okay with that. Maybe we can look at it from a rotational perspective. And it would be something that we can put out there. Any little bit like that does help, and we want to try and, mitigate that as much as possible. So if there is something like that that can be produced, we can definitely sit down with the folks on our side and look at that and see if there's a way to, change that around a little bit, especially if we're working, we can even do it to like say pocket areas. So this pocket works here on this one that's there. But each one of those is going to have to go through that permitting process. And each one of those is going to have to be set up with the land use agreement to make sure that we're covered across the board, from our perspective as the state side. Because when you're working something on island where you're under your own purview, and that's where I think Duncan and Mark's portion kind of comes into that. When you're working under your own purview with those items, you don't have the same sides that we do. Like for example, you're not putting in for FEMA reimbursement when you're just clearing, the stuff that you've cut down off the right of ways and stuff like that, and just your general clippings and stuff. When we do that, we have a mountain of paperwork that goes behind that. And I mean, we're talking, Sean, how many pictures do you take of that stuff from the monitor side on a given day? Yep, you're muted, Sean.
On the monitor side, I can't speak for them. Is there anybody from CDR on here?
I don't think so.
I believe so. But yeah, there's a ton of pictures that go along with it. Like for example, every little bit that they touch, if there's a leaner and hanger, they have to get pictures of it. If they take stumps, we have to get pictures of it. If there's mixed debris, we have to get pictures of it. Every single bit of that stuff that goes along has to be caught. If there's something that's out there, and those monitors are under a legal requirement through their contract to put that out there too. If they don't report that stuff properly from what these folks are doing, then they get reported on that as well. And it's just, it's one of those things of, when you're working on island, it's the same way as I'm working in my neighborhood. I can go clean up a whole bunch of stuff in the houses. Nobody's going to ask me any questions. When we're working at a state perspective where it involves federal funding, we're under a whole different set of guidelines for that. And I think that's where a lot of this might be easier understood, is that as the state, for us to cover this, we have to work at that upper level. And it's kind of, we were talking before, that chain of command that kind of comes through that. I think Bill and I were talking about that chain of command portion comes behind us and says, you have to follow all these guidelines. If it was something we could just come through and wipe it up and, no questions asked, it would be a lot easier, but it's not. And that's the problem that we run into, where we're kind of working with you to try and make that part more palatable.
Yeah. And I just want to, sort of point out, what Ashley said. Look, the parcels being talked about now, they're sort of the parcels of last resort. Like the initial obvious one, I think that everyone would say is, hey, what about all those right off Sierra Lane, those big commercial properties? They're one's wrapped up, can't be used, two others denied by DEP. So it's sort of, we're getting boxed in to where there's not gonna be anywhere to work and everything's just gonna take.
Yeah, and Swin, I really appreciate, you guys, holding these meetings, because it does sort of make it more clear the amount of bureaucracy that we're having to deal with. But just to boil it down, if you could please consider sort of the chip and roll type of scenario, because if it does eliminate some of the permitting requirements, and even if it does take longer, I mean, we can debate whether or not it's the same amount of time or longer or slower, but at least if we could get moving with something that doesn't require all the permits, I think would be a really good step forward for the island to start seeing some of this stuff removed from the roads.
And we will take all those into considerations. Again, I can't guarantee, what's going to happen outside of what we've got. But one thing I can tell you, Mr. Hammond, is right now when you're looking at it, if your main core concern is speed right now, the way that we have it going, that's going to be the fastest option for what we have right now. If we have to turn that around and start that over, I don't want to be, sitting in front of all of you 3 weeks from now and then getting, why don't we have this new equipment on island, going for that? That's not fair to anybody on our side or yours. We want to make sure everything, the parts that we have in place, all the work that we've done, I don't want to throw out the baby with the bathwater on this by going back and starting the process over again. When we talk about permitting, it's permitting specifically for the land portions. Yes, it would take that out, but we'd still have to have clearances required for that. We'd still have to document all that stuff going on. It doesn't change any of the parts that slow it down outside of it. That's just DEP clearing it for use. And again, having something like that, you guys might not think about it in these terms, having those sorts of clearances will also help for future items that come up on that. That one parcel that was at the very south end of that property, that one not being able to be used through a kink in the works that is, resonating all the way through to where we are right now. At that point, all we would have been looking at is, what do we need to get in place to get equipment out there, getting barge rates set, contracts, that sort of stuff. But once that got removed out of it, that changed the whole flow of how this went. Now you've got a potential, handful of spots around the island that are, assuming they don't get built upon or developed or something like that, those might be usable in the future. So when you are having these types of operations, if you do get hit again with something like this, you have options like that you're not going to have to wait as much for. Or if folks are working on island with it, you can get a quick shot permit through DEP if you do need something like that, just even if you wanted to handle it, in a compartmentalized fashion. So there's things that there are, there's hidden pluses here that, can go forward and help with future operations as well.
Lisa?
Hi, so while I understand the none of us need to get into the business of what you are a professional for, it seems as though the comments made here today, both by your team and by the residents on the island who have done this, a combination effort seems to be really the most sensical approach here. So you have the bigger machinery that is absolutely necessary for the bigger trees. There's also 3 to 4 chippers currently on island. Why couldn't it be a combined effort where you maybe break your teams down a little bit into, and I don't know, I'm sorry, what your teams consist of or whatnot, where you could be doing road by road for the residential debris that's there, which is by and large up and down the streets chippable, and still maintain that site for the bigger items, so that you're really you're killing 2 birds with 1 stone by doing a combined effort. And you don't need to start going through the process of these permits and whatnot. To me, it seems like that's going to actually make it all happen a lot quicker. And whether that's doable with the staff that you currently have, it sounds like you haven't really identified what this grinder is that you're intending to use. So why not utilize the chippers that are currently on island and really get this thing rolling quicker and faster? And I apologize on behalf of all of us, by the way, because I hope that it's clear that we, support you and we're not challenging you, but also because it's a smaller island such that it is, I do think it's helpful that, the people that are on this call tonight are giving you the feedback that they are, because they've been doing it for 20 or 30 years. So I do appreciate all of your efforts.
Frank? Oh,
Lisa.
Sean, did you say something? Good.
And thank you, Lisa. I'm more than happy to look at everything that's been brought up in this meeting. I actually think that a lot of it has some really good ideas. Some of the stuff that's been brought up is actually good ideas. I'm not against anything. It's just there's a whole process I have to go through to change our contractual agreement through the state and so on and so forth. I mean, which could then slow the process because we'd have to change line items, so on and so forth, that we don't want to stop and then have to wait 4, 5, 6 weeks, however long it takes to run through the process. But there again, that's not to say that I won't take this up my chain of command as well, and we can look at it most definitely and go from there. I'm not saying no by any means, but I got people to answer to as well.
Frank?
Yeah, thank you guys for all your work. But my experience with land clearing, those piles that are on the side of the road, if you try to chip them in place without a tub grinder, I don't know anybody could pull those things apart and feed a chipper. So the tub grinder would be the only way to go. I'm not in favor of reinventing the wheel and starting this all over again. We're to a point now where this thing's on full steam ahead. Let's just get out of the way and let it happen. Thank you.
Mark?
Yeah, I see how you have your process to go through. And I know you've kind of made your plan and set it that way. Perhaps when you consider maybe the chip and roll to help some of the people in him, I think maybe you start what you're doing. So I don't see there's reason to stop what you're doing, but maybe while you're starting the existing process, make some amendments perhaps without stopping working. So the work starts, but you can kind of modify your process as you go. And I don't see why that would be maybe that'd be something to consider. That way it can maybe head in that direction, but not stop work from starting. And I don't see it's a simple, maybe a fairly simple modification to the process while the current process is not stopping. I think that would make sense. And I think people like Van, who are right next door to this, could probably live with that and it maybe transitions to a little bit of a chip and roll at some point too, while the process starts. And there's something to consider.
And like Sean said, it's definitely something we'll run up the chain of command. But one thing to keep in mind is changing a contractual amendment with state contractors like that can actually stop certain things depending on how those line items are set up what equipment is involved and safety like precautions. There's a lot of stuff that kind of goes into that. I'm not sure if anybody here has to deal with state contracts on a daily basis. They're not any fun to have to go back to the table with, whether it's amendments, change orders, line items, full on, some cases it requires RFP, RFQs. Again, this comes back to the federal reimbursement side of things. If we were not seeking some reimbursement and it was just the state said, have at it, do whatever you want to do, we could get everything cleaned up by just surging every single contractor available across the board and everything could be cleaned up lickety split. But the problem is if we seek federal reimbursement, which we have to do as DEM, I mean, that's our, we are the recipient of the federal funds and we're the ones that have to put that out there to do that. In order to do that, that's what we have to do is follow all those procedurals for that. And in some of those cases, that would require us to probably halt certain activities. And I don't think anybody wants that at this point. We can certainly ask about it and find out if there's possibilities there for it. But, if anybody's curious, if you go through the procurement section of the public assistance grant, the Papa G, what they call it, it goes into this for about 180 pages. And it's no fun to delve into, I guarantee you.
Okay, any more questions on the vegetative process? So real quick, I just want to, and I know some of you guys got to go. We'll try to wrap this a bit. So I want to talk about the how things need to be set out, most specifically the C&D. As I think everyone on the call is aware, we cannot use bull bags. If you have a bull bag, the material has to come out of the bull bag and either be loose or be put in another appropriate bag. When I spoke with Joe with DRC, he stated that bagsters would be fine. This is specific to bull bag. The bagsters would be fine, and any other generic open top type bag. They're the bags that are used for aggregate, like sand and rock and everything that are out there. And then we've got an island owner who has actually sourced his own bag that's like a bagster bull bag type thing. It does have logos on it, but there's no issues with it. It's for something that'll sort of come in the future for the island. Just want to underscore that I was told by Joe that those would also be fine. That as long as it's not a bull bag where there's been sort of some legal threats, that we're good. Is that correct?
That is my understanding. Correct.
Okay. Cool. Yeah. So I think we throw it out there in the community, but JD Porter's got some bags that are on their way from China that he's going to be, we'll kind of get info out to the community that you'll be able to get and have use of. And then beyond that, if things are bagged up in a regular trash bag, has to be a clear bag. This comes down to the monitoring firm. The monitoring firm cannot see what is in the bag, i.e. a black bag, then they won't take it. It has to be cut open, loose, or rebagged into a clear bag.
And that goes again to that funding portion of it. The monitor has to ensure that we're not taking household garbage out, as it like your standard, like tonight's trash night at my house, like the stuff that goes out there can't be picked up because it's not reimbursable, as how that goes.
Bill?
I just wanted to clarify what I think something Ashley said is that the C&D stuff cannot include the repair or new material that is refurbishing the house. So if I understood that correctly, for all of the owners, all of us, we need to make sure our contractors know that the debris, the siding and the roof they pull off and the windows they pull out, that's allowable C&D, but the remains of our siding, our new siding, our new windows, our new trim, our new roof, the new sheetrock that goes in, the cuttings for counters, all that other stuff, our contractors have to know the new stuff has to go in and can go in a bull bag that's not in the right of way. So owners just need, when your contractors start doing that renovation work, they can't add that other stuff because then we could get screwed and FEMA stops them from picking up anything. So Ashley, did I get that right?
Yeah, you're spot on with it, and we'll be, I'm sure, Swin's probably worked with Mr. Morris that's on this call as well. And I'm sure, Justin with the county's got a lot of, background history with this. A lot of it is we can work with that messaging to help everybody understand that. I'm sure plenty of people before me have written stuff on this. I'm sure Sean's had specifics that he's used for it and everything like that. And that would all pretty much encapsulate that in a nice written form so that everybody can be, kind of reminded on that as we go forward to that, but also give you guys, adequate time to work with those contractors to get that kind of stuff out there, if they're the ones especially doing the gutting and stuff like that, so that you guys do have time, to get that stuff out there. So it's not just going to be a, here's your week to get this out kind of thing. We'll find out, maybe even getting a sense of, what the turnaround time is for some of the folks out there. Because I know sometimes, getting general contractors to help, especially after a major event, it can become a little tenuous trying to locate that sometimes. So we'll try and catch as many folks as possible and extend that window out in a at least an adequate amount of time, if not, a superb one, to try and make that work for everybody.
Jason?
Hey, thanks. I don't mean to be semantical about this, and you'll note that I've changed my background to illustrate the Ian hurricane, since we're 3 months in. You mentioned the stuff, the household debris and the trash. So beginning in October, I started making weekly, if not bi-weekly, trips out to clean up my yard. I've taken it from a bull bag to some other bag, to a clear bag, to a black bag, to a clear bag, back to a black bag, back to a clear bag. And in that process, I had to drink some fluids. And I put that in those clear bags. Is because of the fact that I have a Coca-Cola can in one of those clear bags going to cause a problem? I'm trying to figure out how particular this is going to get, because we've been on the phone for 2 hours and it's been pretty particular thus far.
When you're dealing with federal contracts, yes. I mean, in a nutshell, yeah. I can tell you for a fact, there is a gentleman, when I was down in Fort Myers, I'm actually in Tallahassee right now, but when I was down in Fort Myers, the slightest item that was off, say it was a 5% tower call on a hauling debris or something found inside of a bag, like a clear, like a black bag in a giant pile, that gentleman from FEMA would pull me to the side into the hallway and have a conversation with me, which then made me have to go and follow up every little bit of that. So yeah, it can create those problems.
So that's all I needed to hear. Thank you. On the
You
next
can.
trip out, I'll be sure to make sure to remove those Coca-Cola cans and water bottles from that.
You are absolutely correct. It is.
That's how particular it gets. It's wonderful everyone's chipping in to help, but I thank you. It's the person who's giving you that hard time, Ashley, that I got to say, you know what, thanks very little, move on. But Ashley, thank you. Sean, thank you. It's the guy who gives you that kind of hard time over a Coca-Cola can. Tell him to, thanks, see y'all later.
Oh yeah, my jaw's tight after some of those conversations.
So one other thing I wanted to bring up, because it came up today. So, as you do a pass, right? This is basically a general debris removal process. You guys aren't grabbing everything. Let's talk like C&D, putting it in and then getting, rakes and brooms out and sweeping up all the little stuff and leaving it perfect, right? There's going to be debris left over after the debris. How does that work? Is that on the property owner, on the community, for us to go in after this first pass and sort of rake up and bag up little bits of stuff that's left?
I mean, most definitely for those that live on the island full-time, as we come by, if you want to take it upon yourself to push that debris out just to make it move that much faster, so be it. But generally in our first pass, we're getting the bulk of the debris, the hazardous part. There may be smaller debris we're not going to rake because there may be more debris coming right back out, like if you're gutting your house and so on and so forth. So, I mean, we spend all the time raking on the first pass. We'd never make it to that second pass. I mean, we'd be stuck on that first pass for a long, long time. So we're getting the bulk, the hazards. Then we'll come back for our second pass. It'll clean up a little bit nicer with the homeowners' help, much less. We'll have more crews on that. That'll actually pull more of the smaller debris out. And then by the time we do a final pass, whether that's third or whatever, and we do our final pass, then yes, as our crews come down, we'll clean that up better than, you normally find it. So.
Okay, great. So at the end, you do a finer sort of pickup.
Most definitely.
Okay. One thing that was sent to me today, and I sent it around in an email, Sean, I don't know if you were on that email, are sort of like ruts in the road and on private property from the machinery coming in and grappling, like it's wet, so it's leaving ruts. Is that something that you all will sort of patch up at the end to make sure the roads are smooth, or someone's property that, has truck or, tractor sort of ruts in it, that's fixed?
No, sir, we plan to leave that. No, I'm just kidding. Most definitely, we're going to come in, we'll smooth that out. If there's something that, if we have to move dirt, whatever, we're going to make it look as good as it was when we found it, if not better. The roadways, especially given the area we're working now with all the rain and wet, and you got standing water. That's just bound to happen with any type of machinery you're going to use. But yes, sir, we'll take care of that whenever we're all said and done.
Cool. Any other questions from anyone on just sort of the general debris process and pickup? So I don't want this one to be a long one, because it could, and I don't see a lot of homeowners probably partaking in it, but does someone want to explain the right of entry program versus the right of way program?
Yes. I'm gonna get my enthusiasm out there for this one. And Sean will tell me if we need to change it. We kind of came up with, I think is we got multiple tiered approaches to this, but I'll make it easy and palatable and simple. You've got right of way debris, which is that stuff that's on the road, and you have what's kind of a contiguous, because we have one contractor working out there instead of a split, where in some cases you would have like one person handling right of way and one group handling what we call private property debris removal. And that's when you have that ROE, that right of entry. So that's basically indemnifying the state, going in there, moving the stuff out in case something happens. You're just saying, hey, we understand, it's standard liability type stuff, but required, again, there's all that paperwork that comes into play. But in this particular instance, as we're moving stuff out, my understanding is the vast majority is right of way items. That being said, if you do have something that is on private property, we can do it one of a couple ways, or even a multi approach to it. The monitors, as they're going along, will have the same directives as the haulers, and if they see property that has debris on it that is outside of that right of way contiguous pile, or that reach for it, they're going to mark that down for us, and then we're going to create a running list of that. That list is then going to go to a call center, and the call center will reach out to those folks and say, hey, there's debris on this property. If you sign this form, we can come out and remove this off of that. In addition to that, if you guys would like it, we can actually put people out there with I think they're iPad Pros. I'm not positive, but basically we have tablets, and they can come out there alongside that group. And if there's something on that property, we can have somebody do an ROE on the spot. And if they, have the ability to remove it at that time, they can take it away at that time. Otherwise, they can just put it in the queue, and somebody will come behind that and then pick that up as well. So we have a couple different ways that it can go about that. It just depends on what works better for the residents there and what flows kind of better for that. And it can even be both of those if it's something you want to try a little bit of all of it, because obviously not everybody's going to be there all the time. And, it just makes it easier in that case. We want to make sure everybody has some option there, for messaging.
Yeah, so a couple things. So, right of way versus right of entry. That right of way is that edge of the roadway up to a maximum of 10 feet into the property line, right? What the grappler can kind of reach. If it's further,
yes.
If it's further up in, then it becomes an ROE, a right of entry, and they have to do that. So can you Can you explain beyond the indemnification paperwork that they got to fill out or that they have to agree to on the iPad, the implications of if they have homeowners insurance and how that works in the reimbursement?
The state would, when you fill out the paperwork, it asks you for your insurance information, and the state will follow up with that to find out if the insurance company will cover any of the debris that was removed from a cost perspective based on sizes or whatever comes off it, because that's where those pictures come into play. They'll take pictures of that, they'll run across it, and then they will follow up with that on, I mean, it's, in this instance, it ends up being on our behalf, trying to get, what they call duplication of benefits handled out for that portion. And then that was how that would be covered. In most cases, honestly, I mean, we're all Florida homeowners here in some way, shape, or form. The debris cost to get something like that done, most people don't carry something like that. So it's not a very common one because it's just not feasible from a fiscal standpoint by most folks. So.
Understood. Jason?
Hey, is there a chance we could all just sign that stuff in advance? Just to keep the wheels moving?
You could. You actually can go to Ian Debris. Was it Ian Debris Removal? No, Ian Debris Cleanup.com.
Yep.
And you can go there and fill out the forms.
Sorry, Swin, I'm sorry. Could you say that one more time for us?
I'm gonna put it in the chat. Oh wait, chat's disabled.
Yeah, it's iandebriscleanup.com.
Yeah. And the only reason we don't suggest that is because a lot of times certain folks are just not comfortable with the website portion. That's why we offer the option to actually call somebody out to it and do it that way, or put somebody out there on the spot to assist. We also have in other jurisdictions, like Cape Coral yesterday, we actually sent a gentleman out with an iPad to an elderly resident. I think she was about 92, that actually had trouble just dialing the phone properly to handle it. But she had a large tree in her yard. We noticed that it needed to be done. So we sent a person out there, gave a heads up on it, showed up, filled it all out for her, explained to her what it was, made sure she was comfortable with it. And then we got the ROE done that way. So it's working, at that level where somebody's at for that. Otherwise, I mean, yes, it's great if you can get everybody to do that, but the expectation to get, I don't know how many residents total you might have,
Yeah, no, I mean, if we get 10% of the people, it's 10% of the people.
Oh, yeah, most definitely. Yeah.
So can I ask another question then, as it relates to maybe state property or property that maybe, shall we say, unowned or unclaimed? If there's a mattress sitting in the middle of it, are you gonna go get it?
I'm not entirely sure on that one. I don't have an answer for that. Right?
Well, and I'm asking this question because I got a mattress sitting across the street from my house in a state piece of property, and I'm wondering, do I need to climb in there and pick that out, pull that out for you guys to come get it?
I mean, we'd rather you did,
because I don't want to look at it,
but
and I don't want anyone else to have to look at it.
Yeah.
For the next 30 years.
Yeah, so actually, from what I understand, on the iandebriscleanup.com site, there's actually an additional form you can fill out for seeing debris on a land parcel that you do.
That's what I'm thinking of in my head. And I was thinking they were using that, I think, for mangroves and like vessel sightings, but I don't see why you couldn't use it for that, because I know for a fact somebody put in a refrigerator. So that was out behind their house is how it was listed. So yeah, I would say that could be turned into that. And there is a notes section on that to put everything there. Somebody follows up with it and it could just be tied right onto it as that.
Okay, thanks again for your willingness to help here, guys, and appreciate your support. Happy holidays to all. Appreciate it.
Lisa?
And Jason, to your question, I'm hoping that our island cleanup that we've organized on December 31st, I mean, I don't know about the mattress you're talking about, but hopefully, I think that's part of the goal, is that we can all come together to clean up some of those, some of that debris that's just laying in other places that nobody else has addressed. So I think that's December 31st at 9. But my other question was, as some of us have become sites for many of the homes adjacent to us because of lack of available space for their vegetative and other debris, I should have asked this earlier, how high up does the machine go to grab that? In other words, if we have low-lying trees that potentially are in the way, I'm trying to figure out if we need to be either moving it or adjusting some of those piles so that your machinery can come in and grab it.
So far, I've not seen any piles anywhere on the island that our machines couldn't reach. If so, I mean, they're able to move the lower portion of a pile to bring it out to them, and then thus lowering the height of anything.
Right, so it wouldn't damage the vegetation that's above it.
No, ma'am. They would make sure to keep that their grapple and everything,
see.
the surrounding vegetation.
Great, thank you.
Bob?
I think my question kind of comes in on the heels of Lisa's. A lot of the homeowners have piling and rope along the right of way. And in my lot in particular, we've stacked everything behind that piling and rope. I'm assuming that those pilings have to come up so your equipment, which is basically a front end loader with a grapple in place of a bucket, can come in and grab it.
Yes, sir. You don't have to move them. I mean, we've come across it already, several different properties. But there again, it's as far as they can reach with the machine from the right of way. It prevents them from going, any further than right there. That's however far they can reach is all they can get without either you as the homeowner pushing the pile back up to the right of way once we clear some, or if you were to move that. I mean, if it wasn't there, yeah, perfect world. But I mean, we'll make it work. Plus we have a mini excavator out there that's also working to reach and pick the debris out of the tighter spaces as such.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yes, sir.
Any other questions about the right of entry program? All right, I think that's all I have on sort of the list for debris removal process for tonight. And unless anyone has other questions, we're going to let the FDM and everyone bow out, and then I believe Duncan would like to sort of update the community on sort of status of the fire district. And you're all welcome to stay if you want, Sean and Ashley and everyone, but you don't have to.
Thank you, everybody. Appreciate your time.
Thank you, gentlemen. Really appreciate it.
Thanks again.
Thank y'all.
Appreciate y'all.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, guys. We appreciate it.
All right, so I didn't want this meeting to be about anything other than debris removal, but I do owe the community an update as to where we're at. So last Friday, Chief Martin and about 40 in total resigned, firefighters resigned from the district as a result of the failed $447,000 referendum on November 8th, amongst other things. So as of today, I am pleased to report more stability. I know this is a concerning topic for many of our residents and homeowners. So Deputy Chief Brian Dabrowski and both Division Chief John Cook and Trujillo have decided to stay on until at least March 1st on an interim basis. So I'm very appreciative for them to have the ability to rise above the politics and really put our safety first. So special thanks to them. Now, the better news is, as of right now, we have at least 20 employees that are remaining with the district, and I do expect that number to increase from what I'm hearing. We, just to give an update on a couple of other things, we have formed a search committee to hire a new chief, and Van Hammond's in charge of that effort. We are still facing staffing challenges. So, yes, it's nice to be able to report to you that we do have 20 plus firefighters and employees remaining, but the staffing challenges are evident. We have had several applications come in for new firefighters, so that's encouraging. And as a result, we're working with other districts and collaborating with them in case we are unable to staff on certain days. So that's something that I personally am working on. So without a doubt, it's my belief though, and this is, you know, an important one, but it's my belief that our Board of Commissioners intends to keep 4 firefighters staffed at all times, and also to make sure that our community has its advanced life support ALS designation under the paramedic. So I have, as the chair, I have no intention whatsoever of jeopardizing our ISO rating, which you know, keeps our insurance premiums where they are. So I don't, another thing that's important is the district is fully funded until September of 2024. So this would be after 2024 that there are some questions. So we do have 21 months here to handle some of these issues. I don't think it's appropriate to answer any questions right now about anything at the pertaining to the fire department staffing challenges, as it's relatively new, that we're just hearing that our firefighters are staying on, or part of them are staying on. So I definitely encourage those who are interested to attend our board meeting in January. But I will definitely give you my word as the chairman of the board that I will do everything in my power to make sure public safety isn't impacted negatively, as you know, in what as long as I can control that. So I give you my word that I will give it my best effort.
Awesome. Thanks, Duncan. Do you want to take any questions or just?
I mean, we will take a couple of them. I just don't.
Yeah,
really
we don't want
to,
this to become an hour, 2 hours of
well, and
rehashing
also
prior issues.
I'm trying to, I think the underlying message is I'm trying to unite. I'm trying to act as an intermediary between, you know, the firefighters and also the Board of Commissioners. So I think that's my role as chair, to be, you know, in the middle of this. But I'll take a couple questions.
Mark?
Hey, Duncan, I want to thank you for your effort. I think the main thing is, what is the time frame when, like, I know we have an ISO inspection coming up. Do you know what the date of that is?
From what I understand, it's going to be in May of 2023.
Okay, so we have about 3 months to get things kind of like stabilized.
Right.
So when we go through the ISO inspection, we can pass that and keep them.
So the guys are staying on, the officers are staying on until March 1st. The search committee's going to begin very shortly. So I do think it's attainable to find a chief by then. You know, the last one did take, I believe, 7 months. So yeah. But we also were in a different position where we had Bob was still, you know, the chief during that last search.
I think that's probably the only main thing. But the other stuff, I think, sounds like there's plenty of time based on the budget. I think that's just the main focus, get our ISO inspections done. And
so there's no, yeah, and just to reiterate, there's no immediate concern to having to do with the budget, you know, to our district. So in theory, we could run the way we are running right now with our chief, deputy chief, the division chiefs, and the current structure until September of 2024.
And would that still pass the ISO inspection?
From what I gather, that's what I would expect, as long as those positions are filled.
Hopefully the board can just kind of stay on that. I think that's the most, if there's anything anyone should be worried about, it's not the budget. It sounds like it just make sure they're set for the ISO, and if they can use the existing structure to get that ISO, it sounds like we'll be fine. But it seems like that's the
and there's an argument to be made that you know, since the last ISO rating, you know, that we may, you know, improve our rating based on the, you know, the new fire truck, you know, the pole barn, other things, other improvements at the district. So that's speculative. Yeah. So next, any other questions, guys?
Doesn't seem to be. We also have Deputy Chris Lusk on with Lee County Sheriff's Office. Chris, did you want to chime in on anything?
Oh, no, we just want to make sure we were here. We want to say hi, make sure everybody knows that we're still here. We know we've been very mission driven since the storm. Everything's been going really good on both North Captiva, Cayo Costa, Cabbage Key. Everybody's doing a great job. You guys are doing a great job. The island's looking really good. We're there practically. I know sometimes it's hard to see us because we blend in with the shrubbery, but we're there practically every day. So if you guys ever need us, don't hesitate to call us. We're always available. Like we tell you guys all the time, we literally videotaped it the one day. We're 5 minutes and 46 seconds boat ride away if we're not already there. So if you guys need us, please, please, please reach out to us. If you, my email, I try to put it in the chat, but it's disabled. But if you look at my username there, it's clusk, and then it's just at sheriffleefl.org. clusk at sheriffleefl.org. Happy to answer any questions for anybody. If anybody has any concerns, don't hesitate to reach out to us. Okay. Like I said, everybody's doing a great job. We're real proud of everybody, and let's keep it going.
Thanks, Chris. All right. Any other questions from anyone in the community before we call it a night? It's been a long one. All right, we'll shut her down, and you know, as more information comes from FDM and DRC and everyone on the debris removal process, you know, we'll shoot it out there. You know, I know C&D materials moving daily now. They're taking barges of that off and everything. And hopefully the vegetative really gets kicking when they're back on January 3rd. Right on. Everyone have a great night.
You too. Thanks, Swin. Thanks, Duncan.
Thanks, Swin.
Thanks, y'all.
Thanks, Glenn.